After eating at the beach restaurant at the end of the pier, we decided to treat ourselves to a movie. It had been years since I'd seen any film. How strange to think that now I'd be seeing a flick in the city of the dead. Outside we were greeted by a bolted door. Together Jenny and I ran at it and broke it down. Inside we found the light switches, and for the first time in what must have been close to over a week, this theatre was lit up again. Inside we treated ourselves to the establishment's drinks and popcorn, which most of it ended up on the floor, as neither of us were experienced in their machinery. Then I went up to the film gallery and attempted to thread a film through the projector, which after a few attempts I managed to do. The ticking sound of the projector started, and I ran down to join Jenny sitting midway in the cinema, and the film began. It was David Lean's The Elephant Man. I must have put the last film can in as the film started towards the end. We both sat there and watched as the character, Merrick, was enjoying himself. Then it came to the part when he chose to die and laid down. I looked towards Jenny, and she caught my tear in my eye. The cinema went dark again as the film finished, and we both just sat there for a while. No one said a thing or moved, as if we were frozen. Maybe the moment we were in had finally settled in. Eventually we got up and left the cinema and back to the red bus, which was running out of fuel. So we went to a petrol station and filled her up. Then we went off, this time to where I used to work. I hadn't been there since I resigned, but I felt I had to go there one final time, as it was also on the edge of the city. The way we were going anyway on our way out of this hellhole, and back to the real world that lay beyond the city, oblivious to what had taken place here. I stopped the bus outside my workplace, and Jenny and I went in. I swiped my old pass card on the door scanner, which still worked, and we were in. The lights were still on, and the factory noises were still humming. I guess they must have been working that night when our world ended. The day before, the great fog descended, and I woke to this new dead world, which had ironically woken me up from my self-chosen sleep. I walked through the DC to my office. On the floor a layer of dust had built up, but I couldn't remember whether that had been there all the time. The health and safety officer spent more time smoking than actually doing his job. It's funny looking back on it now. Maybe he had the right attitude. As he was now gone, his life finished. I carried on to my chair and found my table was no longer my table. What did I expect? It had been a few years since I had left. It must have been replaced several times. It's strange how in life men come and go and the job is the only perpetual thing ever replaced. And yet now even that motion had ceased and had been replaced by this new dawn that had risen on this dead city. Jenny, who had wandered off to the canteen area to see if there was any tin food or food left by the workers that night, screamed. I quickly ran to where she was trembling. I placed my hand on her. She jumped and turned to face me. Her bottom lip was quivering. "What is it?" I said. "Look in there. Look. It's horrible." I walked past Jenny and opened the door she had just come from. It was an ordinary room, a changing room, but inside I could see rows and rows of statues. But they were not statues. They were men and women. They were the workers who had come in that night. They all stood in a row like some macabre scene. I switched on the light that was to the left of me, and then I was even more horrified. Their faces, their overall body like wax. They looked as if they had melted. Their faces had no features, as if someone had remodeled them and flattened everything out, bits of flesh hanging down from what must have been a chin. It was as if I had walked into an oven, a chamber of the dead. I walked past through each one, all lined in a row like a massive game of chess. Each was exactly the same, slimy like a slug. Each melted. What could have happened to them? I even found one of my old managers standing for what must have been the first time side by side with the workers. He was exactly the same, melted, his arms by his side, as if they had been exposed to some great heat that had lightly melted the outside of their bodies On the floor, too, was some, what must have been melted part of the bodies, which, like candle wax, had dripped down, making the floor incredibly slippery. I braved a touch of the manager's face. My hand went straight through it, just like soft wax. I quickly pulled my hand out and was left with a coating like petroleum jelly, a mush of human bone, blood and flesh. I went to wash my hands in the toilets. The water, I remarked to Jenny, was still incredibly hot. As I'd said, the health and safety guy had more of a penchant for smoking than his job. We both sat in the canteen and ate some food we had found there, got a drink from the tea machine, which as ever tasted oddly familiar, and idly looked through an old newspaper that had been left there. How strange how all the technology in the world could have foreseen whatever had taken place here. Now this very same technology that had been a boon for us was now more than a museum piece.